Backus Health Beat, your source for the latest health news and information. Unfortunately, today we're here to talk about a topic that we really do not want to be here for, but it's an unfortunate reality in today's society. And before we go any further, I would just like to put our condolences out to anyone who is impacted by the Boston terrorist bombing that occurred at the marathon yesterday. To talk about how this impacts us here at home, I have here today the medical director of our trauma center, Dr. David Coletti, and we also have Andrew Ellis, an associate administrator who also oversees emergency planning here at the hospital. I think, Dr. Coletti, I'll start with you.
Sure.
What would happen if an incident like what happened in Boston happened here locally?
When you have any mass casualty events like you had up in Boston, you're going to learn a lot of important lessons. And I think what you saw yesterday was a fabulously functioning trauma system. All parties, EMS, good communication to what is an outstanding medical environment up there to deliver high quality trauma care at multiple institutions. We are fortunate at Backus to have a trauma hospital, a trauma center that rehearses the drill on a daily basis. We fortunately do not have bombing and or explosive events, which is good. But we do have multiple car accidents that have multiple injured patients frequently, and you have to have a functioning system starting with our EMS personnel, our emergency room personnel, certainly our surgeons and our multiple specialists, and then our critical care facility to obviously deliver care after we stabilize them.
Those are great points. Whenever you have an incident involving so many patients and in such a high-profile environment, you really need to have coordinated trauma center care. Dr. Coletti, you had mentioned that fortunately we haven't had any bombings here, and that is a fortunate thing. But Andrew Ellis always talks about being prepared, and it isn't out of the realm of possibility that something like that could happen here, or something involving lots of patients could happen here. So Andrew always talks about the importance of planning. Can you talk a little bit about why we do as many drills as we do, and the importance of planning?
Absolutely, Sean. As I reference all the time to our emergency management teams, it's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. And unfortunately for this region, we've had a few incidents occur over the last several months. Here at Backus, we regularly practice and train and drill with our teams so that we're very ready to go when the time comes. Even on last night, we did our preparations for our teams in an event that Massachusetts would call us for mutual aid and support. So we continue with our training and our drilling on a regular basis.
And actually, we have had our share of blizzards and hurricanes and those kinds of events, and we do have high-profile places here in Eastern Connecticut where something like this could happen. Could you talk a little bit, Dr. Coletti, about the kinds of injuries that they were facing in Boston? I mean, it seemed to be a very intense situation, and from my perspective, it looked like it would be really tough on healthcare providers.
I mean, just looking at the horrifying pictures in any blast, you're going to have two sets of injuries. The first is going to be what we call the primary injury, which is the blast effect, the concussive effect. And you're going to see the limb loss, amputations, abdominal trauma, chest trauma. And then, unfortunately, that isn't the vast majority. The vast majority is what they call secondary injuries, where the shrapnel that was in these bombs or the glass that explodes off of the windows then becomes lethal also in certain circumstances. Eye injuries, ear injuries, multiple lacerations, and it stresses the trauma system because you have horrific primary injured patients that are going to need critical attention immediately on the triage system. And then the next set of patients are going to be the massive secondary injuries that are going to flood the system and diminish the resources. And fortunately, they had multiple hospitals to triage and send patients to.
That's also something that Andrew Ellis talks a lot about. It's not just the incident itself. It's not a sprint. It's more of a long distance situation. Can you talk again, Andrew, about the importance
Sure.
of the long-term impacts of some of these disasters?
As we always talk about for emergency management, it's not just the quick effect of what goes on. You did reference that already. It's going to be the prolonged impact of these situations. Things don't go back to normal for a substantial period of time. As we practice in some of our drills, we don't drill just for the short term, but for the long term. We need to do our preparation, obviously, to be prepared as we try the best that we possibly can to do, but in the recovery phase of these incidents that occur. Boston now is looking at the recovery phase. There's still investigations that are going on, but life has to go back to normal in the very end. And the emergency management aspects of it doesn't end at the time of the end of the incident. It sometimes can go on for several days beyond the time. There will be patients that will be coming with post-traumatic situations, bringing our behavioral health folks involved into situations. There's a long-lasting effect to a lot of these issues.
It's really unfortunate what's happened up in Boston. I mean, I never would have thought that something like that would happen, and our hearts do go out to everybody that was impacted, and in Boston and really across the nation. And I thank both of you for being with us today to talk about this, and hopefully nothing like this will happen here, but we'll be prepared just in case something does happen.